Excuse me. Can I help you?
I'm here to see Santa.
We're in the middle of an appointment. You'll need to come back later.
I'm sorry. You must be Ashley Douglas. I've heard a lot about you, and I gotta say it's
No,
not.
I'm not.
That's right, you ain't. I am.
When'd your corn dog get back?
It's been a bit.
Who's that skinny dude?
Hi, Miss Douglas. I'm Jeremy.
Where you get your money from?
I do work for a medical science company. Right now, I'm testing out these new patches. One time, they cut off my pinky toe and reattached it with a laser.
Hi everyone, and welcome to World Class, conversations with the industry's top photographers, cinematographers, and visual artists. Today we are speaking with American-based Spanish DP Jon Aguirresarobe. Jon talks to us about how he shoots and lights for comedy, which is a whole lot harder than you think it is. As well, he shares some insights on how he gets really unique and special reference images for his projects. This and so many more awesome insights. I'm excited. Are you excited? Let's get into it. Jon joins us from his home in where else but Los Angeles. Thanks, Jon, for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a busy time of year for you, but we really appreciate the time you've given us. I'm really excited to talk to you about so much of your great work, but I also know that you have a really interesting backstory about where you came from and how you ended up in Los Angeles doing the work that you do. So I'm just going to open the floor to you to tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, Del, and thank you so much for having me as well. That's great. Basically, I mean, I've come from San Sebastian, north of Spain. It's a small town. I always wanted to be a painter, kind of thing, an artist. I studied fine arts in Madrid. It's kind of very classical school, not like a contemporary art. I mean, it is, but it has a very, very like classic foundations on the way they teach, which is very interesting, I think, to have all that background. And then I did a little bit of everything. I always done photography since I was a little kid. My dad, when I was 12 years old, gave me a Nikon camera, teach me what the depth of field was, and had a darkroom at home, so I was very familiarized with this. He's a cinematography as well. But tell you the truth, like the person that he was like very into the cinema was my sister, which ended up on a completely different path, and I was more interested in art, on painting especially. And I went to Madrid, finished the painting college, and then I started working on pre-production for commercials for a long time, as well as I was doing some work on art department, photography on set, etc. And I have this company was actually kind of like interesting because we used to do like visual references for directors and production companies for commercials. So very quick, when I was giving a quick treatment, a storyboard from a commercial, something like that, I could deliver very quick a bunch of images related to this. So it was like it was good, but it became kind of like a very easy thing to do. It was even though it was good money, it was good life. It seems to be very easy. On that point, when I was in that moment, there was a director that dragged me as his personal assistant into film prep, like a feature prep. He was doing this classic movie, a period movie in Spain, and we spent like 3 months like working on a script. Then the project went down, never happened. I went back to commercial, and I was like, okay, I mean, that was very interesting. It was very interesting to tell stories. It was very interesting to think about characters. It was very interesting to think about, especially like how to approach scenes, what each of the scenes means for the audience, and how to represent that, right? And I think that was the moment that I said, like, okay, I want to forget about this and want to get into more on the active filmmaking. I know a lot of photography. I talked to my dad like so many times about so many things on the topic, and I knew like I could take that path and do a good job. Is what I thought. Like that's my spot. I think like I took this decision when I was 27 years old. So I kind of later started on this. Probably I was afraid of being in the shadow of my dad. My dad is a successful DP in Spain and things like that. So on here as well in the US. So I think I was 26 when I reach, I guess, my maturity enough to just to be able to make that decision and that jump. I came to AFI here in Los Angeles, and then finished over there 2010. I started like gaffing, a lot of using, graping, things like that. Doing every short came to my hands, and then little by little, every year has been better, and I'm actually very, very happy now. Like,
Awesome.
things are.
One of the things that that looking at your body of work and looking at your history and seeing the art school connection, a lot of filmmakers are going, traditionally they would go to film school or they'd work their way up through crew, they would be either electrician or whatever, and they'd kind of work their way up or through the directing chain. But now, because of the democratization of the technology, we have a lot more art students who are coming into the film sphere from just general art school. Or at least it appears to me that that's increased. One of the things that this has led me to have conversations with people is that, a good eye is a good eye, and you'll often get a photographer who's never done any motion before become a cinematographer, guys like Ryan Booth in the United States, who just have an incredible eye and they understand light. And so that makes me think, like, how important is it for new cinematographers or people interested in the craft of cinematography to study classical art, to study Caravaggio, to study Vermeer, to know that, because they understood how light fell, and that is one of the most important aspects of cinematography. So can you talk to me about maybe the importance, or maybe it's not important, about knowing art and knowing art history, and how that applies to your craft?
I consider myself not a very good technician. Let's say, I don't know every tool that we have. I know like the freak guy that knows absolutely every camera out there, like everything. And just like, I think like it's very important to have a background like that, as well as a background on seeing cinema, old cinema. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to see art. I think it's very important. Literature is very important. Culture is very important. Travel is very important, because to me, the most important thing in cinematography is just the concept of what you're saying. It's not like the way you're gonna approach that at the end, like you're gonna end up learning that technique. But it's just the most important thing to me is the concept of what you trying to tell, and where you like let's say like, where you like tools in terms of like the lights that you have or the camera you have. I mean by this, like the tools that you have on your background as memories of things, and that you can refer to, that colors that you've seen, that you can relate to the feeling, and all these tools are the ones that are going to help you deliver this concept that you have. And the concept has to be related to the story and has to fit that script and that mood that the story needs. I think that's the most important thing, and that's the most difficult thing. And the more background you have in other kind of field, the better it is. You work, I think.
Right. And another interesting aspect is that you have worked in the art department, in commercial and film. So you have a really good idea of, the importance of good production design and the importance of good art direction. And I, when I have conversations as well about cinematography with people, I say that, when you're trying to tell a really good story and make a really good film, that cinematography is actually quite subservient down the list of things that you need to have first. You need to have a good story, good characters, good sound, good art direction. And then when you have all those things, then you can worry about how you're going to light this thing and shoot it. I mean, that's my opinion, but, tell me a little bit about how much or how little importance you place on art direction in the work that you do.
I briefly worked on that art direction. I did a few things, and then so that's how I step a little bit into it. And then, but to me, it's like it's essential. Art department and the collaboration with art department is fundamental, because they're going to be building what you use in front of your camera. Like, I mean, it's just that tone on the wall. Just, I don't know, like you would have talked to wardrobe as well. Like you do clothes, like. Some directors that they don't invite you or to some of the meetings with wardrobe and things like that, and I think like it's very important to have us on their back always, just to support their idea of what they're thinking, and that's very important. I mean, it's exactly, it's going to be what is in front of your camera, and each of the departments is important, like, because I mean, production. I'm a very person that I think it's very important to me. Like, this is more generic kind of concept, but I think it's very important in filmmaking that everything makes sense. What I want to mean with this is just like, for example, you want a script that that I don't know, that like it's something doable with the budget you have, right? Like, you want to collaborate with the producers because you can get a 12K, and you can solve that problem, but that there's no budget for that, so you have to make it work. I mean, you have to talk to people, you have to make everybody happy. I mean, you have to choose your battles, of course, but you have to make it work with what you have as well. And the same way, the most important thing at the end is just to have a story and to have a look of the movie that fits the story you're telling. I think there's a mistake on cinematography sometimes, that we want to do every image look pretty and fantastic for our reel, and I don't think it's about that. I mean, I think, to me, especially, it's like the idea that you get from starting cinematographers. Like, I just need this to be in my reel. Yeah, I mean, it's true. You need good images on your reel, but your work is to do an image that fits the story, and that concept has to be there. And that's the most important thing. Is how the message of the script is going to reach the audience. I think it's essential. And you use the collaboration of each department to do that.
So what I want to do is I want to talk about a couple of the projects that you've shot, and sort of break them down for the viewers. Talk about your process on how you, from sort of farm to table, from pre-production to post-production, how you made those projects work. But one of the things that I want to sort of frame everything with a little bit is that a large portion of the work that you currently have online right now is, be it commercial or be it narrative, is comedic in nature. It's light, it's funny, and I think that there's a lot of DPs out there, a lot of cinematographers or people interested in cinematography want to create very moody and cinematic style, Spielbergian or Roger Deakins style cinematography, and they don't think as much about the amount of skill that it takes to light comedy and to shoot comedy. It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's sort of like Roger Deakins says. He's like, if I've done my job properly, you don't notice me. You don't notice the work that I've done. And I think comedy is a great example of that, where if you do it well, it just looks natural and normal and fun and light. So I'm really curious to hear about what you've learned over the years about shooting and lighting comedic stuff, whether it's commercials or narrative, and what are some of the main things that are sort of teachables for you that you can pass on to other people about how you do that.
Okay. I don't know, like the way I approach comedy, it's funny because I do a lot of comedies, even though like I would love to do thriller, but I never on that world, and I actually I have a lot of fun, and I think it's very, very difficult. And the difficulty is on finding the balance on comedy. I think we coming from a background where comedy was very overlit, it was very front-lit, and now we are on a period on cinematography where natural lighting is becoming kind of a very important thing. I mean, started with Nestor Almendros, and know how to start approaching the cinematography in a different way. And today, I mean, this natural aspect of cinematography, it's out there, and I think it's, on drama or any other genre, and that's what is helping comedy, just to get out of that kind of flat, bright look that it used to have and give it a little bit of the natural look. But between those two, I think is where you have to find the balance, and that's the tricky part. You don't want to be too natural, because you need your faces to be lit properly and nicely, but that doesn't mean that they have to be front lit. It can be a side light, but it's soft enough, it's warm enough, it's filling enough, so you create a direction and you can create a character on the image, on your work, and still be shooting comedy.
Oh God, not the seer. She was our best chance of stopping this werewolf menace. Look, We know the werewolf is living among us. We must be vigilant. Report any suspicious behavior.
It's Harvey. Harvey's the werewolf.
What?
Wait, Harvey's the werewolf?
No. I am not the werewolf.
No, he's definitely the werewolf.
Well, Jane, let's not jump to conclusions.
Guys, look, he's got blood literally dripping from his mouth.
Well, sure, I can explain that. Before you all arrived, I happened upon the seer, and I got down to see if she was okay. And I sort of slipped and fell and got her blood all over my face and in my mouth and under my nails.
Well, that makes sense.
Nope, no, it does not.
Come now, Jane, this is harmless Harvey we're talking about.
And my approach is always just to find the way it can be believable in terms of where the sources are coming from. To me, it's very, very important that. So if you design a scene, you try to talk to the director, how the blocking is done, so it kind of works for you, for the direction of the light. And then that way you don't have to put a top light. You don't have to do all flat. You can just work the natural sources that you have on that space, on that geography, and make that light look look pretty. And I think that's what is helping me, just to stick to that thing of like to that concept that the light has to come from natural sources. Right. And then I make it look more pretty or less pretty, depends on the mood that I want.
Are you sticking to any sort of light ratios in terms of key to fill to background that tend to work in most cases, or is it different every time?
No, I think it's pretty close. I mean, I don't think like I go like very dramatic, and especially in comedy. I mean, you don't want to be like with more than a stop difference, like something like that. I cannot be actually 100% specific. The way I use the light meter is kind of like I don't know. It's the way I learned it. Gets from my mentor, my dad, of course. But I use this as all spectral light meter. Well, they're still building it. It has a very big bowl. Right. And the way it goes is just if my key is coming from this side, I just go from the key and I just go rotating like this, and then I got kind of my exposure on the midway, and that's my exposure on camera. I know, as I said before, I'm not like a very strict technician, and I go all by eye. And when I use the light meter all the time, but I just do it that way, like kind of like I find my balance that way. Right. But yeah, in comedy, you don't want to go like more than step and a half, like something like that. And then, but your key can be like a bit brighter than it's normally, can go step and a half even. Within, if you shoot in Alexa, you can go step and a half over on the face. It's fine, Yeah, it's very good too.
And what about the camera work in terms of where you place the camera? What are your sort of go-to shots and frames, and where do you where do you place the movement, the camera movement? What type of movement do you use? Are you on stabilizers now more often than dollies? Are you sticking to dollies? What are some of the things that you find you're doing time and time again when you're shooting comedy?
I love dolly. I love having a dolly, having the track, and depends on the director, because there's directors that they don't want to over dramatize comedy. They don't want to have the camera play much on the comedy, because especially like it's very important to create like what is the tone you're creating in comedy. Again, it's just about balance. If you have a very funny joke and it's already funny, it's working, you don't want to over dramatize it with the camera move. I think it's overkill sometimes, like it's too much. Like a very kind of classic, simple comedy, the way I want to shoot it, like in terms of the camera. I rarely do jokes with the camera. If I can, in a static shot, like relate to characters in a way that is funny, I will do that, but not with movement, with pushings into like a detail, let's say like I don't know, like oh, look at him. I mean, there's a few on the Gunfighter, one of my works, that I think that on that moment they make sense. But in general, I'm very classic, and I think like because my approach is still being naturalistic, and I don't want to be like too fancy, and I don't know. It's the way like it comes to me. Right. I don't know if I have any kind of specific rule. I mean, the only rule I can think of is just like comedy. You can do close-up with a wider lens. It's going to work. It gives me more dynamics, and I think that's something that I use a lot. People is a bit scared, but I think now especially with new lenses, if you have master primes, new cooks, or new Panavisions, you can go like close. I mean, there's not that much of a variation on the faces, and it's more dynamic because the characters move and it's more stuff, and you tell a little bit more about the background behind them as well with the wide lens. So that's one of the things that I always stick to.
Now, as a cinematographer, when you're shooting comedic stuff, so much about the comedy is in the editing, is in the cutting. You know, how the delivery is, how long you hold a shot when you cut to the next thing. And so presumably it's a little bit more, my guess only, is that it's a little bit more formulaic in that you really just have to give the editor certain puzzle pieces so that they can cut for comedy, and that if you start experimenting outside of that, you really kind of screw your editor a little bit, right? If they're trying to cut for traditional comedy. Is that true? Is there a sense that you're trying to get some traditional coverage so that a lot of the pacing and the comedy can happen in the edit?
I think you always have to have on comedy like your specific shot for the joke. Like you want to make sure like your jokes are told properly, and if you do kind of some kind of like a more artifact shot, it has to be something a part of your joke that you already have. I think at least you know it's going to work 100%. Right. I work a lot with Eric Kisak, which is a director that is also an editor, and it's fantastic to work with him. He edited Horrible Bosses 2, Bruno, The Dictator.
Oh wow!
Daddy's Home. Done a bunch of work with him, and so he's a very good comedy editor. And I learned so much from him, like how he will be timing his shots, like literally with a watch, like kind of like very, very attending a lot to the rhythm. And then there was one occasion where the producer came and he's like, he was pressing him so much to say like, you have to move on. I mean, you have to move on because we're running out of time. And he's a very calm person, but he told producer that day, he's like, I'm sorry, I'm not moving on because the joke is not there yet. I don't have the joke. Okay, and I respect him because I trust him 100%. As a director, like I can be with him. I go to the end of the world with him, and he insists and he got the joke properly on that shot. And then I walked to him. He's like, okay, we're a bit screwed. So what we should do now? Because we were really running out of time. And he told me, no, now that I have the joke, I just need this insert, this close-up saying yes or whatever, and this, and we're done. Are you sure you have the whole thing that way? Yes. You see the scene works perfectly. You know, like, so, and what I want to say is just like, you have to get your joke clean, and that's going to be your lifesaver.
Right. Should DPs in pre-production for a project, regardless of what it is, should they have discussions with the editors? Should they be talking? Should the director and the editor get in a room together and chat about how it's going to be shot and how they want it cut, so that the cinematographer knows what kind of coverage the editor and the director need? And is that an important conversation to have, or should that just happen between the director and the cinematographer?
I never had that conversation with the editor, to tell you the truth. I always had it with the director, and because the director is the one that I think it is the captain of the ship, and I think is the one that has a clear idea about how thing has to be done. Or maybe he gets a sense, and then you work with him to kind of understand what that sense is. Right. And yeah, I mean, I rarely talk to the editor. I always like directors are not. I mean, normally they share with me their cuts, and because they know, like, I can remind them about like a certain shot that I remember it was good or something, you know. So they, I appreciate that they share a lot their previous, like the pre-cuts and everything. And yeah, I get involved a little bit on that, but just like that.
Right. So let's actually talk about, I definitely want to talk about the feature film that you finished recently and that got a bunch of awards at South by Southwest. But I want to talk about, to start, when you started working with Eric, one of the, a short that you did 3 years ago with Eric kind of went gangbusters online and went viral, and it was a really big hit, called The Gunfighter.
The weary gunfighter walked slowly through the saloon. The long miles from Cheyenne had taken their toll.
Who's saying that stuff?
He scanned the room with a suspicious eye. Years of being on the wrong side of the law had taught him that a tough man can get out of a situation, but a smart man never gets himself into one.
Please quit doing that. I just want to have a shot of whiskey in peace.
But the gunfighter would find no peace, for the Henderson boys were waiting in the corner to kill him for the $200 bounty on his head.
Is that true? You boys trying to kill me like this voice is saying? No.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that piece, the conception, how you shot it, and sort of the particulars around it?
Okay. Yeah, I love the Gunfighter. I think it's extremely funny piece, and I really love it. And again, I think that's a good example about like talking about that balance between drama and comedy. This was a Western, so I was like, wow, this is a Western location. It was amazing. There's a bunch of Westerns over there on that location. I think it's on this new TV show, HBO, it's on Westworld. I think it's one of the locations actually there. Sure. And when I got there, it was like I was so tempted to do something very, very muddy, but at the same time, it has to be like comedy. So finding that balance, I think that's a good. I'm very happy with the balance that we found, Eric and I, on that short film. On the way I work with Eric is very simple. He come in a couple like normally when he already have everything together, like location wise, he has that figured out. He has like the story figured out and everything. He calls me in, and then we sit for a few hours. We talk through shot list. I think it was very specifically shot list that short. And then I don't know. Like I said, the best is I give you all the specifics of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear about. I mean, it's lit really well. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Bob Richardson style, or like Sergio Leone. Kind of embodies a little bit about that classic Western look, but a little bit more modern, of course. So tell me about once when you went to production, how you got the references for that, how you knew how you were going to light it and shoot it, and then how you actually lit it and shot it.
On that case, it was like at the end, it was totally true. It was kind of end up a little bit on that place because the limitations we had. Kind of thing. It happens a lot. So in this case, we didn't have like a big lighting package or anything, but I really like talked to the director, he was producing this short. And I told him like, look, I mean, to me, very important for this location is that we can see out of the window some kind of detail. Because I know you're paying a lot of bucks for this location, and you have this whole village, Western village outside those windows, and there are windows everywhere. We have to be able to see outside a little bit. So he told me like, you tell me like how much you need. And I ended up like, because we didn't have the money to have a budget to have a Jenny or anything, I ended up like getting 3 M18s, a couple of immediates, a few Kinos, and a Joker. And it was astonishing how, I mean, it's amazing how those M18s do with how you can do with those M18s. And basically, like, I knew I would want to like reach those spaces to have this rap because it's like kind of the comedy thing, but at the same time have that kind of moodiness of it. So basically, M18s were playing from outside, doing kind of a slash of light. There was a lot of haze into there, so we have that kind of like period mood. Yeah. And then inside, I worked it inside, a lot of bounce from the floor, skip bounce with the Joker, and big source, like a very, very, I think it was like a 12 by unbleached muslin inside with image 80s.
Right.
And that was the main approach. Like it was believable, I think, because the direction on the faces, it was coming from the light was coming from the window, but it's still like the backgrounds were dark because it was just lit by the slashes of light coming through the windows. And
are you using unbleached muslin because, I mean, there's so much wood inside that location that the atmosphere is already quite warm? Is that sort of the idea there, as opposed to just straight bleached muzz or grid cloth or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, and it feels like it's thicker too. It's a thicker diffusion, so it's like less noticeable the light that way. We used, as I said, like a skip bounce on the floor, and it was like natural wood,
Right.
so that helps you kind of like have the same, be in the same world. I think I shot probably like Alexa. I mean, I shot Alexa probably like 6,000 Kelvin.
Wow.
I think the Alexa works wonderfully with daylight and 6,000 Kelvin. It gives like a very, very nice warmth and skin tones.
Right.
And we shot on master primes. I always use a bit of diffusion, black promise, like an eighth or a quarter, something like that. And again, like everything was laid and done with a little package to fit in a van.
Yeah, and it was all off house power. There's no Jenny.
House power, no Jenny.
Yeah. That's an incredible thing about those M18s from Ari is that they deliver such a huge amount of light that you can you have to be. I find you have to be careful, but you can run them off a 15 amp circuit. Sometimes 20 amp is better, but.
I think they strike at 16 or something like that, and sometimes 15, like a healthy 15 would take it.
Yeah, exactly. That's very cool. So and then you've done a bunch of stuff in the interim, but you did your first feature with somebody else who's quite interesting, who was both a director but also worked behind the scenes in film as well. So I find that story really interesting, and it's sort of a I don't know how you'd categorize it, but Hunter Gatherer is sort of like not like a dark comedy or sort of like a dramatic comedy. How would you describe the film? Tell us a little bit about it and how that project started for you.
I don't know how to classify it, to tell you the truth. I mean, I really love the story, and where he calls me, like when I read the script, like what I was very passionate about is just like don't know where this is going from. I mean, it's just like. It was very weird. Like everything was like every page. He was like, "Where is this going? Like, what genre is this? Like, is it comedy? Is it dark comedy? It has a lot of drama at the same time, and it's a very sad movie,
Right.
but packaged with the kind of like a comedy thing, but in a really dramatic way. So I was like so excited about the project when I read the script. I was recommended by a colorist actually in New York, Alice Bickle, which is a fantastic colorist. He actually colored Moonlight, which is the movie of the year in the indie world. He colored my last movie as well as Hunter Gatherer, and he was the one that recommended me to the job and read the script. I walked into the interview and I was like, I have to get that. So it was very, very, very extremely exciting. And I don't know, like you want me to talk about, like, for example, how we start or how we.
Yeah. So this is a new director that you've worked. You hadn't worked with him before, and I would say it's almost like a very American style comedy, and certainly you bring a European sense to the work that you do. You have a more of a worldly view. So coming into what is almost to me sort of a classic American story, how you approach that theme, but also how you approach working with a new director and how you form that relationship with him, and then how you chose to shoot it in the way that you shot it.
Yeah. I think like the story required like a very, very natural look to a movie. I think it was a very raw story. I think it has to be told like in a very raw way. That's the way I thought from the beginning it has to be, and it could be dark, and extremely natural and practical. And the good thing about it is just like in this case, this movie is extremely honest because it's not a $300,000 movie trying to be a $3 million movie. It's a $300,000 because the script. I mean, of course, we could be better with a little bit more, but it's not trying to be a big, pretty movie. It's just about these little things, these very practical locations like that to grab what is already there, no? And we shot on Compton, South Central LA, which isn't very, very easy, and with a very small package. And I think the whole thing, it made sense. It makes sense to me. Like, it's what I was saying. It's like, it's not about having the high-end tools or anything. It's just like, you find something that makes sense like that, and you find the balance between that drama and that comedy. I think it's just the key for success. Director, he was first-time director, but he is a production designer for a long time, and he's a very, very good production designer. he will be very involved into into finding the locations, and I think we basically paint only a single wall on the entire movie. Everything is natural. Everything is almost what it was there. So there's like a pink hotel, green rooms. Like it was like
That's the beauty of Los Angeles. You get so many great locations.
It was, I have to tell you, it was very, very scary when I saw it. I was like, whoa, okay, this is a room that is like 14 by 16. We have to fit refrigerators in here, and there's two characters talking and moving, and all the walls are green. So it was like, it was very, very scary. And but director is a fantastic director. He did an amazing job for his first time directing. He had a very clear idea about the sense of what he wanted, and we talk about a lot of, more than specific. We talk a lot about like generics of things that we liked. For example, there was like we ended up like building this book of visual references, and they were none related to any movie. I mean, there was paints, there was a lot of photography, like with any kind of, maybe just like a reference for a scene. It was just a shot of a close up of an eye, you know.
Yeah.
It's black and white, which I mean, if you're giving this as a reference for a scene in a movie that it's Afro-Americans in LA and you're in a green room, it doesn't make any sense. But we cannot create this world of artsy, world of senses, let's say, that way.
So I want to interject here just so I don't lose this thought, but because you have a background in researching references, and because you went for this film to references that weren't other filmic work, that were just random images or whatever, is there any sort of sense that you have a trick to finding good reference images, like that, you know, to say don't always go to Vimeo or don't always go to classic films, you know, look in these spots for references, something that you've learned along the way?
I look a lot on the internet, but I look a lot into, I don't know, like if I show you my table, it's a mess, but I don't know, like I go a lot to photographers. I mean, you have like guys, and like it's always a great reference. You have things more. I just found out this book is like unbelievable. I don't know if we can talk about this.
Sure.
This is a magazine that I used to use a lot on commercials back in the day. It's amazing. You just have this book, and this is a very, very artsy kind of photography, you know.
Wow.
And you refer to scenes like using these kind of things, you know, like it doesn't need to be specific about an image that is something that you want in front of the screen. Like the way I approached when I used to work on this, and I had this company of visual reference, he was like telling the client like, I cannot give you the exact image that you want because this is something that you build in, but I give you pieces of it. I give you a reference of colors, and I might send you a painting. I send you like a photo of fashion because that wardrobe works for you. I send you like a photo of street photography of a character because this is the kind of character you have on your piece. You know, like I kind of like it's like a passful of things that creates like a concept, and that's the way I approach it.
Yeah. And so I'll sort of let you finish. If you can even remember, we can pick up what you were talking about in terms of hunter-gatherer, just sort of how the rest of the production sort of, wrapped up and finished for you.
Yeah. So with the director, we have this kind of like, let's call it like collage of references, which is beautiful. And then he wanted to approach it's all shot handheld, but it's not a shaky handheld at all. And he wanted to approach almost like a very static handheld, which is we call it Zen-held. So we shot on an Arri Mira, which is a wonderful camera as well. It's
and
great.
why the Amira versus the Alexa Mini or the Alexa XT or?
I think Mini was just came out. It was more of a budget then.
Right.
Yeah, there was not availability for and we choose the Mira versus the Classic because the weight and it's the handheld.
Right.
We shot on master primes. No, sorry, we shoot on super speed, size super speeds.
Yeah.
But I have two lenses of master prime. I mean, we couldn't have all master primes, but I decided to have two, the 27 and the 40. And the reason and the 21, sorry, 3. And the reason it was just because we were in tighter spaces inside. I wanted to have a couple of wide lenses that I could rely on in terms of distortion. Because size super speeds are great lenses. I love them. I can do a lot of work with them. But then when you're in a tighter space, you put a 21, and they're not as modern, they're not as clean on the edges. Yeah. So we have those 3 lenses kind of like work a little bit the insides. And I realized that I could just use a quarter black promise on those super speeds, and then a little bit less on the master primes. And then I actually they kind of match pretty well.
Right. And so maybe seasoned cinematographers are going to know what you're talking about. But for the folks that are new to filtration, just talk to us a little bit about using ProMist filtration and what you're trying to achieve with that, and why you would change it out from lens to lens.
Yeah. So basically, you can always go clean with the lens, or you can always just use some diffusion on it. I always go for diffusion for some kind of element that can, let's say, affect a little bit the cleanness of the HD, especially on the digital cameras.
Yeah.
And the new modern lenses. You want to kind of soften a little bit the edges of things, and at the same time, you help me. What I like about specifically about the black chrome is like how it bends a little bit the highlights. It doesn't make the highlights go so straight into highlight. It used to be even more prominent in the past, not before the new cameras. Like if you go with a Sony F900 or something like that, you have a window. You will go straight into the white. Like there's no transitions. Yeah. It's usually make some transitions, and also it helps you a little bit of diffusion. It helps you with blacks. Right. So they lift the blacks a little bit, so you kind of be safer on that side.
Would you suggest a filtration like that for folks who are still shooting on DSLRs? Because DSLRs have a pretty, fast roll off to highlights. Do you think that's advantageous for them, or is it sort of not worth it?
I think it's a taste thing. I used to do it when I shot DSLRs. I used to put black promise on it, and I have a bunch of old 70s Nikon lenses, and I used to shoot wherever I could, just destroy the image of a clean HD image.
Yeah, and here's what's interesting. I'm glad that you brought this up, because when I watched the trailer, I was like, this looks so vintage. Like these lenses, there's an aberration sort of happening on the edges, and there's a quality to the look that I was like, did he shoot this on old glass? Or but then you had told me that you had actually shot some of the film as well on 16 millimeter. And so it made me wonder, okay, well, how did you arrive at this look? And then how did you seamlessly blend the 60 millimeter footage in and the Amira footage? So talk to us a little bit about that.
How to get to that look? I always try, when I read the script first time, there is an idea or a sense that comes to my mind. I try to stick to it. And it's something that naturally kind of comes together, because I just keep having that in mind, and then when all the decisions are made on the way, I just go back to that feeling that I have when I read first time the script. And that means okay, it has to be very raw, it has to be kind of very, has to have that magic realism as well. So let's go with something soft, let's go with something broken. It's all about how we can make it very broken image. And that's where we went to kind of more vintage lenses, which are very common. I mean, super speeds are everywhere.
Right.
And I think then we did a lot of diffusion on it to have that kind of a magic realism. And then the way it combines with the Super 16 footage is just actually on the movie, you can recognize when it's 16 and Amira I think, pretty clearly because they're transition shots. They're poetic elements on the movie, the ones that we shot on Super 16. And we actually shot double exposure on camera on Super 16. So basically these elements that the director was very enthusiastic about on the interview, and I was like scared to death because he was telling me you have to double exposure on Super 16. That means that you roll a shot on Super 16, then you rewind your negative, you put it back into the camera, and you shoot on the top of it again.
Right.
So you don't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
And obviously, I said like, so what's the point of doing this like this, and why we don't want to do it on post? Because you can do this on post, right?
Easily, yeah.
It's very easy. He told me like he wanted the magic of it. He wanted the non-control part of it. He wanted to just let it go and risk it. And I thought it was beautiful. I mean, it was a really beautiful approach. Like for a first-time director that normally will go safe,
right.
He's like, I think it's going to be magical.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Was it the first time that you had even attempted double exposure on film before? Or
yeah. I have a classmate that did it on AFI on some day, and then I called him next day. He's like, how the hell you do this? It's very simple. You just put your film on your camera, and you mark the negative with a sharp on the gate. You mark the gate, and that's your first frame. When you rewind and put it back, you just find that frame, you put it there, and it's going to match. You know?
And how do you manage exposure so that you're not overexposing the film? How do you deal with when you're double exposing it, not overexposing it?
You basically have to underexpose a little bit what you're doing, everything you're doing, like by one stop or something. Right. But then depends if it's more about you have to keep a record of what you're doing, because we were not doing like one of the images rewind the next images. No, we were creating clips, and then a week later we would pick up one of those clips and combine into the actual element that we had in that. So it was kind of very random, and the way just keep the track of what you have in your cans, and some spotlight with the spotlight meter you get a little bit of tracking of what you have, right. And that's how it worked, and it turned out beautiful.
Oh, very, very cool. And what's the reception to this film been? When did it come out, and what kind of reception did it receive?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, it's just like every time I hear from it, it's just good news, and it's so exciting now. It opened on South by Southwest this year. It won Best Actor for Andre Royal, got Best Actor on it. It just came to AFI Fest. He was here at AFI in LA. He got signed with Orchid as a distribution. He's been here on the Cine family for a week. It was very, very exciting. It's right here next to my house. So it was great coming from Spain, and having that is unbelievable. And then now we just found out he's going to be on the Spirit Awards. He's nominated to the Young Cassavetes Award and the Spirit Awards for movies less than $500,000.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. And so now, since then, you've shot 2 other features since then, or are you?
2 more features, yeah.
Yeah.
I shot a feature in Mexico. It's a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And that was $3 million with Catalina Aguilar Mastreta, and it's a 50% English, 50% Spanish kind of movie.
It's pretty much a straight line from the border.
Hello. Oye, ¿no es mexicano?
No, but he has a Mexican grandmother named Jacinta.
Jacinta, yes, I did. First few times I met the family, I had a Mexican grandmother.
Tenemos una historia maravillosa. Me da gusto echarlo a perder todo con el matrimonio.
¿Daniel? ¿De plano?
¿No te imaginaste que tal vez no te quería aquí?
Since I'm crashing the wedding, maybe I'll take your seat.
It was good. It was a completely different approach to everything. Like hunter-gatherer, we were 2 electricians and 2 grips, and we have 2 1.2s, a few Kinos, LEDs, and a few tungsten units, and that was it. And this was Mexico with $3 million. You could do a lot. So they had like 12Ks, like M40s, and 80s. It was fantastic. Beautiful. We have a piece of hospital built on the stages, and it was kind of tricky because the story happens between LA and Ensenada.
Right.
And we shot interiors of LA in Mexico City. We shot Ensenada, and then we shot here in LA, like the exteriors.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. I learned so much. I learned a lot.
Very, very cool. I'm super looking forward to seeing those when they're out. I'm sure that it represents a interesting direction and a change in direction for your work, because you're now just getting into the feature world here. So it's really cool to see that. And so let's talk about a little bit to close out sort of career management from your perspective, because you, at least initially in the work that you have online, there's a pretty clear a certain amount of directors that you've worked with, that you've attached yourself to, and now you're branching out and working with new directors in these films. Talk to me about sort of, as a cinematographer, developing relationships and how important those relationships are for your career. And if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I think it's extremely important, any relationship to do on filmmaking. I mean, it can be a production designer, it can be a director, it can be a producer, it can be everyone. Like, you never know where work is going to be coming from. And I think it's very important to me just to take everything that comes to your hands, like especially at the beginning. Like, you want to have hours on set. You have to shoot as much as you can and learn. And even though it's very frustrating because there's no budget to do anything and there's like a lot of difficulties to shoot, I think it's so important because you never know where it's coming from. First time I met Eric Kisak, which is the director I work a lot with. It's the director of the Gunfighter. I shot union commercials with him, and I shot a bunch of stuff with him. He approached me one time because a friend of mine recommended me to him, and we sit together, and he showed me this script that we have to shoot 8 pages a day. And I was like, oh, okay. So you stay positive and you just go for it. And it worked out, and then we have the greatest collaboration you can have, between director and DP.
Right.
And I think it's very, I don't know, like, that responds to your question.
How did you initially, before you had an established career, when you were coming out of film school, out of AFI and stuff, how did you develop relationships with directors? How did you find directors to work with and make new connections?
It was very hard. I mean, it was a lot about like friends that recommend, somebody that you have a lot of DP friends, especially out of the school. And there was a lot of like, hey, I cannot do this. Do you want to do it? Or just, or remember, you were the gaffer of him, and then he can do it, and things like that. That can be a way. I approached the schools too when I came out of the FI to do shorts. So Los Angeles Film School takes DPs from out of the school to shoot their shorts. You can shoot shorts for New York Film Academy. They take DPs from outside. They have their equipment. They have the things. You just try to approach every angle like that you can find. I know like these people that started Mandy or Cracklist and things like that. I never done that.
Right.
I never done that. And then it's been just like how very quick that kind of circle started expanding. By knowing. But doing a project like the producer is happy. That's because I always say like it's always also good to get along with everybody and like to collaborate in a good way, because then suddenly it's the producer that calls you for something. I want you to meet this director. I mean, you never know where it's going to be coming from. So you always have to do like your best work, enjoy your job, and do a lot of energy and positive attitude. I think it's important. We always get frustrated. Of course, we are famous for it. GPs, no, we get frustrated and we just we have to kind of like still try to show ourselves as positive people and hard workers.
Right. And how do you? I'm not so sure I know how to phrase this question, but what are some of the strategies? Because you can never. When I talk to producers, I say like, we talk about the job of a producer is to take everybody's input and then, decide what's best for, globally for the project, and so what, a good responsible cinematographer will do is they will ask for everything from the producer, and then it's the producer's job to decide, well, do we have the money, and all these other factors. So how do you approach, those working relationships in terms of knowing what to ask for, based on knowing what you're likely to get, so that you don't get super frustrated, but that you're also realistic. How does that game play for you?
Yeah. I always try to see from the beginning, even before I get the job, if it makes sense. So I try to make a few questions to producers, especially if the script is complicated. If it's something simple happens in the house, I don't know. There's many ways of shooting it with almost nothing. But if it's a little bit complicated, you want to make sure like at least the minimal is covered. So you want to see that. You want to investigate a little bit of that. And the best way is normally if you can know the amount of crew they're thinking on, you're going to have a sense of where is the package you're going to get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a little bit like, and if you know those rates and how many people they're thinking you might need, you have a better sense of where is the size of the project you're getting in. And then you can ask. I mean, you can always ask like, so how much money do you have for package? I mean, and then once you get into the project, I think it's very important to have a wish list and have a bill list, which is the one that you know is the minimal you need, and then is your wish list. And normally producers their job is to say no and to save money, so probably they're going to say no to your wish list. But at least now from that point, you choose your battles and you go and fight for where you think it's important in that wish list, and then you know that you save because you can do it with your bill list. So I don't know if I explained myself.
Yeah, very, very well. That's a great idea. I think that's awesome to have that sort of two-prong approach that, you know, shoot for this, but also know minimally what you absolutely minimally need so that you don't end up falling below that. I sort of want to give you
to have that wish list to be, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's very important that wish list to be realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to make sense. I mean, you cannot like, oh yeah, sure, 12 cases. Like, no, I mean, you have to know and have a sense of the kind of project you're getting in. And then
right.
kind of something like, I don't know, like what I was saying, it's like just you always put like a couple of 18s and they're going to tell you, whoa, you know, oh, okay, change it for 1.2s, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. I want to give you the last word before we close out this conversation by just telling me sort of when you look back when you started this journey as a filmmaker to where you are now, you know, maybe one of your biggest revelations, something that you know now that maybe you didn't know back then, that has become instrumental into what leads you to continue to do the work that you do today and into the future.
To me, the good thing is like every year has been better than the year before. I took a lot of risk by just getting more into the narrative world and getting out of the more of the commercial thing. I mean, you make way less money, but I think it's so important to look back and say like, okay, where everything started. It was like I wanted to tell stories, and now I'm telling stories, and it's unbelievable because it's been a journey of 7 years now, and I don't know, I would never think on the past I was going to be here, and it's amazing. And I keep seeing like how much you learn every day on set, like every single project, even though it's like a small thing on DSLR to anything, if you put all your energy and all your heart on it, you're going to learn something out of it, and you never know where it's going to take you, and it's unbelievable and it's very surprising.
Yeah. Be a good person and put your whole heart into it. I think that's fantastic advice, you know, for any career. Yeah.
Any career.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jon, I know that you've got a super busy schedule this time of year, and I super appreciate the time that you've taken with us. So much amazing knowledge that you passed on during this 1 hour. So I think people are going to be pretty happy with what you were able to share with us today. Thank you so much for your time, and my best to you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much.